Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of our Support Talks. My name is Jessica. I'm one of the bereavement counselors here at Avow.
And hello, welcome to our fourth also. And my name is Nancy, a counselor at Avow.
So, today we wanted to address the topic of complicated grief and then share with you some of the subtypes of grief that fall under this umbrella that often is referred to as complicated grief. So, not that I need to remind many of you, but we are fastly approaching about 1 year into this pandemic that we've been dealing with. So I felt that the complicated grief topic was very spot on with what many of us are experiencing at this time, in addition to our personal loss. So, complicated grief is simply a grief reaction and feelings of loss that are debilitating, long lasting, and or impair your ability to engage in daily activities. So typically, I know many of you, when you first came to some of our bereavement groups, you often ask, is this normal? Is this normal? Should I be doing this? Shouldn't I be doing that? And you have probably heard myself and Nancy say so many times that, yes, that is normal. Yes, this is normal. So, complicated grief is still all of those signs and symptoms of your normal grief. It's just tends to be lasting longer. And now maybe you're noticing it is interfering with your daily activities. Maybe you're starting to feel sluggish. You're starting to feel unmotivated. Completely understandable considering everything that's going on this past year. So do not feel like if you're falling into this complicated grieving space that you're alone or that you're doing anything wrong, because you certainly are not. And I think when we get into some of these subtypes, it'll also help you to better recognize how normal this complicated grieving is. So, with that being said, the first subtype that I would like to focus on is referred to as chronic or prolonged grief. So, this is a strong grief reaction that does not subside and lasts over a long period of time. Of course, that long period of time can also be subjective to us. This tends to have the individual experience extreme distress over the loss with little or no progress toward feeling better or improving their daily functioning. The griever is usually incapacitated by their grief, and so their daily function is very limited. And then this often occurs for a long time. Okay. So when you're thinking about this chronic and this prolonged, again, bringing it back to the pandemic, you may have felt like you were doing really well on your personal grief journey, and then the pandemic happened. And now we have these additional losses and these additional areas for grief that tend to come up and really complicate what we were already working on. So it's okay if you are feeling this way. It is okay if you're feeling the weight of the world on your shoulders. You're juggling a lot. And so we just wanted to provide you some information in this regard to let you know that it's okay to be where you are. Okay. The next one is cumulative grief. So this one may hit home for many of you. Cumulative grief is much like it sounds. It is when somebody experiences a second loss while still grieving that first loss. It can also be considered bereavement or grief overload. I would think that many of you are raising your hand right now that that's where you are. I think I'm there as well. It's okay. You have all of these secondary losses due to the pandemic that you're experiencing. You probably have noticed all of the secondary losses that have come from losing your loved one. And all of that just starts to pile up. And now we have all of these layers of grief that we're trying to shift through. And again, this past year hasn't been very kind, hasn't afforded you much peace and quiet to just be able to sit and sift through all of those layers. So we're glad that you're here to learn more about that today and hopefully be able to join in with some of our groups to get some additional support in that regard. Because lastly, what I wanted to talk about before turning things over to Nancy is the idea of collective grief. And I know in the previous episode we discussed that collective trauma. And so this is very similar to that. This is the grief that the world is feeling right now, the grief that the community is feeling, all the sub communities. So it's felt by a collective group, such as community, society, village, or even the whole nation, as a result of any kind of event, such as a war, a natural disaster, terrorist attack, death of a public figure, or any other event that leads to any kind of national tragedy, which I would say we're experiencing. We may have experienced a few this past year. So when you have everyone around you also struggling with some type of grief, whether they lost a loved one or not, they're grieving and there's loss. And so sometimes they're not as supportive as maybe we would like or we would expect. Or maybe we're noticing that we can't be as supportive as we would like to our family, to our friends, and even to ourselves. So, just wanting to let you know that it's okay if you're feeling this way. It's okay if you feel overwhelmed. I want you to know that it's normal and it's expected, especially with everything going on. This is really the time when you're noticing if you're falling into some of these categories that you just focus on those coping skills that you have been using and maybe try some new ones. Maybe really dive into that self care arena that you might have been pushing to the back burner. Now is really the time to focus on you and focus on what kind of support you need, and knowing that that support's going to change over time and that that's okay. It's why we have a wide variety of groups and different counselors that you can talk to. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us at any time, even if you've been involved in groups for a while and you think that maybe you're starting to notice some of these complicated grieving categories coming up for you. That's okay. Give us a call. We're more than happy to assist you throughout this journey. Nancy?
Thank you, Jesse. And yes, she's so right when she says there's so many subtopics underneath that umbrella of complicated grief. And some of us are not aware. We've just kind of lived day to day, knowing that we're in pain, or maybe kind of hiding that pain because we're busy just gathering resources or just taking care of what happens after you lose your loved ones. And so we're trying to kind of like swim and trying to find our way, and then we find that we're drowning and we try to swim back upstream again and we continue to fall. And so there are many other topics in this complicated grief umbrella, and the two that I'm going to discuss are delayed grief and masked grief. So delayed grief is what it says. It's delayed. It's something happens that you're not able to grieve for that moment, right? And in the world that we're living in, of course, what happens? We're living in this pandemic where we're so concerned with this pandemic that sometimes we don't even get to bury our loved ones, or for that matter, even see them. I mean, on a personal story, I have a friend that is in his 60s and his son was in his 30s. They both developed COVID and they went into the hospital. The son died and the father came out never to see his son again. How does this man grieve? Right? He put it in the back burner. And still to this day, when I speak to him, I can still hear that loneliness in his when he speaks to me. And he just rather not talk about it. Another thing about delayed grief is also who's the important person, who's the strong person that takes over when somebody passes. That person is taking care of the family, making sure that everybody has food on the table, making sure that all the paperwork is done, making sure that the funeral arrangements are being done. So what happens to that one person? They delay their grief. And then after a certain time, that person all of a sudden starts to feel sad and depressed. And it could be 6 months down the road because now they're cleaning the closets and helping the family. So they're not able to grieve for that moment, for that loved one that has passed. So again, delayed grief. It's that one person that everyone depends on. What to do when you're finding yourself 6 months down the road and you need to really find out what's going on with you, because now it's delayed and you're getting headaches and you're getting stomach aches and you're not sure what's going on. So you think that it's a medical problem, or it is a physiological problem. So what do? You start to take care of yourself. You start to do a little exercise. You call Avow. We're here. We're here for everyone. We're here. You can talk to us. You can do a Zoom like we're doing today. We can come and visit you. You can come into the office. We social distance. We still wear our PPEs. So, just to help you and to help you to realize that all those physiological feelings that you're having are part of that grief that you delayed. So that's really important because, we're not taught how to grieve. So we don't know. And sometimes, even in our later 30s, and somebody special dies, then we're like, oh my God, how do I deal with this? Because it's something we're not taught. So we have to take care of ourselves when you get to that point where everything is kind of not done, but when you've taken care of the big things for the family, because you know that they depended on you. Okay. The other one is mass grief. Mass grief is really important because it affects children too. And when I get on these episodes that we do, I like to always bring in children because, it's not that they're left out, but we always think of, Avow and our adults. And although we have a children's area, I like to bring that up. So, we don't get formal training when we're grieving. Adults don't really speak to their children about grief. But children learn how to grieve when they're small, when they lose something. They may lose a balloon, or a toy breaks, or somebody steals their toys, or, in this pandemic, they've lost friends. So what happens? Parents usually say to the kids, oh, don't worry, it's okay. Be strong. Don't think about it. Keep busy. Oh, don't worry, I'll replace that. That's not that important. So as a result, kids learn to grieve in that way. They won't worry about it. They won't think about it. They'll keep busy. And those are the initial griefs. So we need to teach people how to grieve, which is where we come in, basically. We show them that it's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to not want to do anything for a while. But it does become complicated when the grief is prolonged. So with kids, we have to teach them, tell me how you feel. Explain to me what's going on. Why do you feel sad about this little toy? Why do you feel sad about your friend? So already we are starting that base that we all need to learn about grief. Because, like I said earlier, we're not taught. So some of it may come as a shock, some of it we just put in denial, and then we have to go through all those stages, the 5, 6 stages of grief, and still, we don't know. It's something that is so different to us that it's difficult for us to get our emotions intact when we're going through that pain. So it's all about getting in touch with your emotional pains for adults and certainly for children and kids as well. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope that having a little more of a definition for some of these terms was helpful. Please feel free to reach out to us at any time. You can set up an individual session or join in on one of our many groups that we have available where much of these kind of topics do get addressed, and you are able to hear from a variety of people who are in your same grieving boat how they're managing these things. So it is a very excellent way to get not just support, but information, education, and start to build your own support system within the group and outside of the group. So we look forward to hearing from you and take good care.
Absolutely. Peace to all.